The 90s were a fantastic time for Donkey Kong. I shouldn't have to tell you that, I already told you that across 4 very long videos. The original Nintendo star saw a massive renaissance under British developer Rare and its string of amazing titles. But as the world collectively prepared for the burning of the traditional Y2K log and the turning over of all 4 digits on the calendar at once, an ominous omen portended an ill harbinger. Donkey Kong 64. Okay, don't panic. Surely that was just a bit of a misstep, a well-intentioned and ambitious leap into 3D that didn't quite land. They did their best, okay? Surely the first decade of the 21st century would prove that DK still had what it took to shine. Nintendo had a new console coming out, the Nintendo GameCube, and Rare was going to be at the forefront of development for that system, just as it had been for the Nintendo 64. And that's exactly what happened. They crafted GameCube classics like Star Fox Adventures and that's it. That's the only game they made for the GameCube before Microsoft bought the company in 2002. Okay, now can we panic? Welcome back to Donkey Kong Dissection. Without Rare, I think it's fair to say that the Donkey Kong series floundered for a while. Oh, that's not to say there weren't Donkey Kong games during the 2000s. Nintendo sold some plastic bongos to go with Donkey Konga, a rhythm game. You even used those bongos to control DK in the decidedly more platform-focused Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. The cheeky gorilla wasn't just making music though, he climbed vertical pegs in DK King of Swing and its sequel Donkey Kong Jungle Climber. He even followed Diddy's example by starring in his own racing game, Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. And these are all games that I have never played. The only reason I even know any of them exist is because I'm a huge fan of the Geek Critique, and even he didn't think it was worth it to devote standalone videos to any one of them. I'm not saying that my lack of exposure to these games means that nobody played them or enjoyed them, but I also don't think my experience was all that atypical. I've been a Nintendo fan all my life. Growing up, I never even thought about defecting to another game company. Okay, well, I did ask my dad for a Sega Game Gear one Christmas, but he managed to keep my Nintendo purity alive by completely misunderstanding my request and buying me a game for a handheld I didn't own. I still have the game. I've never gotten to play it. True story. Stupid story, but true story. Okay, maybe that experience is atypical, but for Christmas of 2001, when I was 15, I didn't ask for the newly released Nintendo GameCube, I asked for a PlayStation 2. I had gotten really big into Final Fantasy the previous year, and given that that series had jumped ship from Nintendo the previous generation, Sony was where to go to play those. Given how well my Final Fantasy videos do compared to Donkey Kong Dissection, I can see that that decision certainly paid off for me down the road. But let's face it, the GameCube era was not terribly successful for Nintendo. I did eventually get a GameCube in 2003 and have never regretted it. I love the aesthetics of it. The console's very cute, the discs are very cute, the controller is fine. The game's lineup features not without merit, but perhaps my least favorite installments of my favorite franchises. Its Paper Mario is fantastic though. I think most of the use I got out of my GameCube was playing repackagings of older games that weren't even for that system. As for Donkey Kong, well, I owned Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Party 7. In the latter case, he's not even playable anymore. And it's not like I'd ever play as him in Mario Kart because I'm a princess, damn it. I have heard, however, that that era did some pretty good things for Metroid. Anyway, by the end of the decade, Nintendo was on sturdier footing. The Wii had become a huge success thanks in part to its motion-based controller. And while everyone's grandma was playing Wii Sports, the new Nintendo console hosted other amazing first-party titles, including one of my favorite Mario games of all time. And it was in this environment that Nintendo decided to revive Donkey Kong. Again. They just needed to go back to what worked in the 90s. They needed Donkey Kong to have a country. They needed Diddy Kong and Rambi and Cranky. They needed a Western developer whose company name started with an R. That part's surprisingly important. Since Rare was no longer an option, they instead selected Retro Studios based out of Texas. Retro Studios had risen to fame by making the Metroid Prime series that had revitalized that flagging franchise during the GameCube era. The studio that had turned Metroid into a first-person shooter now needed to prove they could make a tough-as-nails 2D mascot platformer. The result was Donkey Kong Country Returns. You know what's wild? When Donkey Kong Country returned with Returns in 2010, the old Donkey Kong Country was 16 years old. As of 2025, the year I'm releasing this video, Returns is now 15 years old. I guess that passage of time shouldn't be too much of a surprise. My Donkey Kong Dissection videos have gotten quite a bump this year. First, because this game was re-released for the Switch in January, a good video release window I missed. And then the next revival of Donkey Kong, Bonanza, released alongside Nintendo's latest console, the Switch 2, in July. Another good video release window I've missed. So if DKC's Donkey Kong is not your father's Donkey Kong from 13 years earlier, then this would be not your father's Donkey Kong, and the Bonanza Donkey Kong would be not your father's father's Donkey Kong? Our great-grandfathers were playing Donkey Kong in the arcades in the 80s. That's how long ago it was. Look, the point is, you're old. You're old, I'm old, we're all dying. Now enjoy this Donkey Kong video. Donkey Kong Country Returns walks a tightrope. It has to be a bold revival while also tapping into that 90s era nostalgia. The backlash against 2D platformers as antiquated had subsided from what it had been when Donkey Kong 64 came out. In fact, that retro charm was even in vogue, with new 2D releases purposely mimicking the graphics and gameplay of generations past. DKCR is a different beast. Like DK64, it presents a return to Donkey Kong Country basics in a lot of ways, and largely ignores Donkey Kong Countries 2 and 3. It takes place on Donkey Kong Island with many of the worlds based on those found in that first game. Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong are the playable characters. 100 bananas nets you an extra life, which is represented by a red balloon. The plot revolves around enemies stealing Donkey Kong's banana hoard, and it's your job to get them back. Even the soundtrack is primarily, but not entirely, composed of remixes of tunes from Donkey Kong Country. But even accounting for all of that, this game isn't a retro throwback, despite the developer's name. Somehow, while crafting a final product that is reminiscent of the classics, Retro balances that with an identity all its own. Let's start with those enemies. Bursting forth from the top of the island and activating a volcano in the process are... not the Kremlings, but the Tiki Tome tribe, a race of sentient musical totems led by Tiki Tome, who use their hypnosis abilities to get the jungle fauna to do their dirty work of stealing the bananas for them. It doesn't work on DK because that swirly thing on top of his head is actually a jamming device that blocks any incoming signals. Or maybe it's a tumor.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
Regardless of the reason, it means that DK and Diddy are the only ones who can stop this plan. Now, if there is any complaint I've consistently heard even up to this year, it's lamenting the lack of Kremlings in post-Rare Donkey Kong games. I might ruffle some feathers by saying this, but I really don't care that much. Don't get me wrong, I like the Kremlings, but there has never been a single moment where I've bounced off the head of a Tiki and gone, geez, I wish that was Clump, or Cobble, or Critter, or even a Naughty. That's because the Kremlings, outside of their fun designs, are little more than functional villains. Sure, King K. Rool is wacky and charismatic, to the degree that he's in any of these games, which is not much. As far as I'm concerned, they performed their job well, and now I'm ready to see the Kongs take on new foes. But the Kremlings are fine, these guys are fine. Sure, I'd be happy to see a zinger, but since the Tikis control non-Tikis, there is still a variety of enemies. Frankly, I feel it was a smart move for the balance. At this point, I don't know if I'd want another Donkey Kong game that's just K. Rool steals the bananas. If it was the Kremlings, I'd want them to have a new plan. But since it is the same plan, I think the game needs a new enemy. The setting for this game is the same location as Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong 64, Donkey Kong Island. But is it? Or has Retro transformed the old into new? In the Geek Critique's review of this game, he asserts the volcano activated by the Tikis was under the Gorilla Glacier world from the original Donkey Kong Country, explaining its absence here.
The active volcano that was apparently beneath Gorilla Glacier explodes. We'll mourn the loss of Slipslide Ride, but the eruption has unleashed something far more heinous.
I find that a fascinating continuity theory. And it is a theory. I reached out to him and he kindly clarified that it was an idea he had heard from the fan site DK Vine. There is nothing in the game itself to suggest this is what happened. From the brief glimpse we get of the island before the volcanic eruption, it simply looks like no Gorilla Glacier area exists. Now, I'm not bringing this up to critique the Geek Critique. I love Josh's videos. I bring it up because that theory encouraged me to consider for the first time where or if this game fits into the previous continuity. And that seems to be timely, as the appearance of a certain character in Donkey Kong Bonanza had fans debating continuity this very year. Personally, I don't think these games are story-focused enough to be too concerned with continuity. The original Country trilogy was more story-focused than other video game platformers, but that's still not saying much. However, if that connection was something that Retro wanted to minimize in order to create its own spin on Donkey Kong, I'm fine with that too. This isn't the kind of work where a continuity snarl is going to bother me. Video games are notorious for bending continuity in a way that other mediums do, but can't as easily get away with. Take Donkey Kong 64's interpretation of the setting. Sure, the island has the iconic DK head shape, but aside from that, its layout and scale are vastly different from that of Donkey Kong Country. Of course they're different. One is a scaled-out drawing only seen from one side and only navigated by moving from point to point. The other is a 3D model that has to be fully explorable from every angle and be able to be rendered by the Nintendo 64. The needs of the game outweigh the needs of the story. Is that a continuity overwrite or simply a concession to the realities of production? Or both? I don't have an answer to that, but regardless, let's look at some of my observations. This Donkey Kong Island is very much not in the shape of DK's head, which is understandable. This version is a fully rotatable 3D model that your character token moves around from point to point, and which also contains every single one of the game's individual levels. There is no separate secondary map for the individual worlds. It's self-contained and far less abstract. All of the levels have to fit on it, so yeah, there's no head. It just wouldn't work. And while I've been making this video, Donkey Kong Bonanza has released DLC featuring its own take on the island. From what I can tell, it too incorporates elements from previous versions while tailoring the layout to suit its own needs. Just like DKCR's island. It references the history without being strictly beholden to it. Most of the worlds from the first game are still present and largely presented in the same order, if named in a slightly more Spartan fashion. Rather than World 1 being Congo Jungle, it's now just World 1 Jungle. How boring. At least the level names still contain the alliteration and rhyming. However, a new beach world is introduced in between the jungle and the ruins. Monkey Mines, the second world from the first game that contained a mix of caves, mines, and ancient ruins, is now spread out into a ruins world and a cave world. There's a new fossil-heavy cliff world between the forest and factory worlds, which is the point the original country game featured its ice world. See, DK Vine's opinion was that the cliff world is the crumbling remnants of the DK head. If I were to indulge in in-universe theory, I'd say this was Gorilla Glacier, now returned to how it was in prehistoric times thanks to heat from the volcano. After all,
what killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Wow, I have 2 Arnold Schwarzenegger clips in this video. I didn't even realize that until now. I mean, the cliff levels even use the music from Gorilla Glacier, just saying. The final Chimp Caverns world is replaced with the Volcano world, but that is explicitly conveyed by the narrative to be a newly formed environment. Once again, Retro is balancing on that tightrope pretty well. There are just enough connections to the old game that you can reason this is the same world, but it allows itself the freedom to adjust it and make it theirs, both through the structure and the narrative. Even in terms of the duplicated world archetypes, Returns can heavily alter the specifics. The one that immediately springs to my mind is the factory setting. Donkey Kong Country's Crim Croc Industries Inc. is sleek and modern. The floors are shiny, the platforms have caution tape on them. The factory in Returns is completely different. It's bonkers, with technology straight out of old Warner Brothers cartoons. It features big red buttons that connect comically oversized plugs. There's a giant cartoony rocket that launches a smaller cartoony rocket. Giant robot hands play shell games with barrel cannons. Clumsy robots spew fire and robotic chickens explode. Every piece of sheet metal looks mismatched and salvaged. And of course, it's been scrubbed of all Kremlin nomenclature. Is this the same factory worn down by age and rebuilt by the Tikis? Or is this simply the spiritual successor to the archetype of a Donkey Kong Country factory world? There's just enough evidence either way for plausible deniability. The forest is full of Kong-eating plants and giant mushrooms. The beach is home to pirate crabs. Moles live in underground cities connected by networks of trains. These are all things we've never seen in Donkey Kong Country before, at least not anything like this. The application of Cranky is something else that stuck out to me. First, I should say that, unlike Donkey Kong 64, this Cranky is now back to being DK's grandfather, not his father. It's definitely a sign that we're in good hands. I was pleased to see he's still the same old Cranky, but is he? He still quips and complains, but that's not all there was to Rare's version of the character. That character is specifically cranky about the state of video games. He breaks the fourth wall to complain about the video game he's in. As far as I can tell, this Cranky never does that. At least not outside of gameplay explanations that every game character has to lean on to an extent. The video game hero aspect of the Donkey Kong world seems to be scrubbed from Retro's interpretation. But it's something I didn't notice at first until I stopped taking it for granted that this was necessarily supposed to be a direct sequel. Cranky's reputation in my mind simply filled in the gaps for me. But it does make me wonder how or if a Donkey Kong narrative could use Cranky while accounting for the advancement in technology beyond the 16-bit era. Would he eventually have to time shift so that we'd see a Cranky nostalgic for the good old days of low polygon character models and 4 megabytes of additional RAM? The fact is that Donkey Kong Country Returns has less of a narrative identity than the Rare games. It doesn't feature a world filled with other Kongs or bears to visit. The instruction manual, where a lot of that cheeky personality got to flourish, is pretty standard. It doesn't include any additional detail that would flesh out the story or characters, like Diddy's desire to prove himself. It pretty much says exactly what the opening cutscene does. Bad guys steal bananas, go get bananas. Because of that, it leaves itself open to fans filling in the gaps or questioning whether this fits with the previous games. It is kind of a shame given how much personality Rare filled their entries with, but I can live with that because ultimately, Donkey Kong Country Returns has to sink or swim on the basis of its gameplay. What excites me the most about Donkey Kong Country Returns is how it plays. Where do I even begin? It's Donkey Kong Country. You start in your treehouse, you run to the right, you collect bananas, you navigate challenges, you know this. But Donkey Kong Country Returns doesn't wallow in the past. It revels in how far technology has come in the 16 years separating it from its progenitor. As I frequently pointed out when I covered those games, the technology used to make them look so good was kind of a cheat. Those environments look 3D, but they're really just a pretty picture dropped on top of the usual static collision and hitboxes that made up games back then. That's a trade-off that Donkey Kong 64 had to make when they made the jump to actual interactive 3D. That's why the graphics didn't look quite as good as the Super Nintendo games had. Well, now they get the best of both worlds. Wii graphics are largely indistinguishable from the pre-rendered models, some textured fur notwithstanding. And now the games get to use fully rendered 3D level geometry in their 2D game. The results are just amazing! Totem poles crash in from the background, barrel cannon sections feature changing perspective and depth, you scale an entire cliff while it crumbles around you. These kinds of things could never have been done on the original trilogy, and they make the world feel so much more immersive and kinetic. When I first played this, the degree of spectacle reminded me of a motion simulator at a theme park, except you actually have control over this. There are frequently obstacles chasing you, smashing at you, plunging you into the background. It's amazing how many new level themes this allows for. The Wii Remote was, and still is, very different from most other video game controllers. Aside from its unfamiliar form factor, it boasts its main selling points of IR aiming and the ability to register user movement to perform actions. The remote by itself can be held horizontally and function like an NES controller. It can be attached to a nunchuck to allow for a more modern configuration. Donkey Kong Country Returns allows you to choose from both, which is nice. Personally, I prefer the NES option as it's always easier for me to play 2D games with a directional pad instead of an analog stick. But each controller configuration is quite comfortable. The Kongs can run, jump, and roll like always. In addition, they can climb, ground pound, and blow. Yeah, blowing is a mechanic in this game for some reason. And of course, some of those actions are non-button based commands. Certain non-essential events are completed by frantically shaking the Wii Remote to simulate punching a boss, or an end-of-level barrel. Those are pretty fun. Rolling, pounding, and blowing are also activated by waggling the Wii Remote. To roll, you shake it while moving your character. To pound, you shake it while standing still. To blow, you shake it while standing still and crouching. Let me be clear, it's pretty common to make fun of motion controls. I don't do that. I've always been a huge fan of the Wii. After what I considered a lackluster GameCube era, the Wii excited me with how it was literally shaking things up. I find shaking to do a spin attack in Mario Galaxy to be easy and intuitive. I love the IR bow and arrow aiming in Twilight Princess. Swordplay in Skyward Sword is uniquely immersive. And I'm probably the one person you'll ever meet who only ever played Mario Kart Wii with the Wii wheel and thought it was perfect. I love motion controls. I hate them in Donkey Kong Country Returns. Well, hate is too strong a word, but it occasionally pushes my tolerance to its limit. Using waggle as a substitute for a button is fine. Using it as a substitute for 3 buttons is problematic at best, and it's honestly a miracle it turned out as well as it did. And I get it. The game has a lot of actions the characters need to perform, and the Wii provides a limited number of buttons, especially in the horizontal configuration. The actions to perform are pretty intuitive to remember. It's the execution that sometimes throws me. I often misjudge just how still of a stop I need to come to blow on an object and end up rolling straight into an enemy by mistake. When I want to get a roll going, it turns out I didn't shake it enough. I think I've even been in a situation where I shifted position while playing, and that counted as a roll I didn't want to do. Now, don't let me blow this out of proportion. The control scheme is fine. Most of the time it works and I have no issue, but that still places it below all the others. well, I'll still take it over how DK64 controls. The partner concept has been completely reworked from the Country trilogy. Thankfully, there are no tag barrels either. In the trilogy, while each Kong had different strengths and weaknesses, each one operated as a full and equal character. Dixie may be the secondary character of DKC2, but you could keep her out front and use her as the main, the same way you could for Diddy. That's not how it works in DKC Returns, at least not in the single-player campaign. Here, you are always playing as Donkey Kong. I guess that's an answer to the games that keep writing him out. Put it in his contract that DK has to be on screen at all times. Diddy is technically playable, but not as his own character. He serves as more of a power-up. Having him gives you more hits. His jetpack from DK64 returns, only this time its controls don't suck. Here, it basically serves as a floaty jump to make platforming significantly safer. And whenever you have your partner, your role is buffed. Ever since the first Donkey Kong Country, the Kongs have had a rolling move. It served as a way to attack enemies from the front, or get extra distance in a jump, or to build up speed by chaining it through a line of enemies. Here, the basic concept remains the same, but has changed significantly. The new roll provides a much bigger, sudden burst of speed, however it can't be chained or extended by rolling through enemies. Once it's reached its predetermined max distance, the roll stops no matter where you are, which actually makes it dangerous to try to use against a line of enemies. That's where the partner mechanic comes in. When you have Diddy, he rides on top of you while you roll, like riding on a barrel. Appropriate. He propels you forward indefinitely, so as long as you keep shaking that controller, you keep rolling. It's a rebalancing trade-off. The standard roll is weaker than in the classic games, but the new partnered roll is stronger. The original DKC had a hand slap move that allowed DK to very occasionally unearth secrets. It was exclusive to that character and that game, probably because, while it was pretty fun to play around with, it didn't have much utility. Well, Retro brings it back and does far more with it than Rare ever did. It's bigger, faster, and stronger to— okay, wait. But yeah, it's true, it's no longer a slow wind-up resulting in a single pair of hands. 2010 DK brutally and quickly smashes everything, and this move can be used to destroy parts of the level to find goodies and activate switches and pads. It fits the characters so well, and it's the most satisfying and natural application of that wee waggle control scheme. For the exact opposite of that, there's the blowing mechanic, which is also used to interact with the level for goodies, to blow out fires, and to activate switches. Does anybody like this? It's an unnatural fit for motion controls. It grinds the pacing to a halt as it takes a few seconds to accomplish. It can often be difficult to line up the object you need to blow on, and yeah, like I already mentioned, there's a chance you might just activate a roll to your death instead. This is such a weird choice. The only logic I could think of is that the developers wanted a slow, quiet move to counterbalance all the destructive, bombastic moves. And that turned out to pretty much be true, as Donkey Kong's creator, Miyamoto Shigeru, asked Retro to add blowing because apparently the game needed more whimsy. The initial response at Retro was literally, what the hell? Look, Miyamoto is a genius who has shaped my entire relationship with video games. But we're not going to agree on everything. There is something slightly humorous about this being a tool in DK's arsenal. It doesn't ruin the game by any means, but I can't say it was a great decision. Then there's climbing, which is tied to a button. Jeez, can you imagine the nightmare of having to shake the Wii remote the whole time you're climbing something? Climbing is a skill the Donkey Kong games have exhibited from day one, but once again, Returns presents it in a new way. Instead of ropes, the game focuses on climbable surfaces, represented as patches of grass or networks of chains that DK can grasp. It's such a small change on the surface, but the versatility really allows for creative implementation. These can be present anywhere to allow you to climb vertical surfaces or hang from ceilings. The surfaces themselves can change or rotate, requiring you to constantly reorient yourself to continue on. Not only does this skill allow for platforming challenges never before seen in Donkey Kong Country, it just feels right. DK is a gorilla, exploring the jungle. Of course he's going to be able to climb his surroundings. It goes a long way to making this character feel unique, rather than just furry Mario. King of Kling indeed. Given that this is a Donkey Kong game for a new generation, it's not going to have the exact same physics of the old. And it shouldn't, it's its own thing. Even the trilogy changed rules on occasion. You ever notice that in the first game, jumping on top of enemy barrels hurts you, but in the sequels you have to bounce off of enemy barrels to progress? Things change. Still, I will conclude this section by bringing up one minor gripe about something they changed that I don't like. I've never seen anybody else bring this up before. In the original trilogy, colliding with a solid object would cause you to fall straight down from it. If there was a gap below it, you could then position yourself to land in it. Oh, but not in Donkey Kong Country Returns. Here, colliding with a solid object causes you to forcefully bounce off of it. If there's a gap below it that you're actually aiming for, well, you're probably just going to fall in a pit and die. Thanks a bunch. Thanks a banana bunch. Now you might have noticed that when I covered Donkey Kong 64 last year, I did not devote a section to animal buddies. In fact, I only barely mentioned them in passing. That's partly because that video was already pretty long. It's also because animal buddies are such a small focus in DK64 that they're essentially cameos. Rambi shows up a couple of times and only DK can enter his crate. On Guard appears in one level and only Lanky can turn into him. Squawks mainly delivers exposition and instructions, but will carry Tiny in a couple of cutscenes you activate, but don't control. Animal buddies don't have much more of a focus in DKCR either. Rambi returns as the only rideable mount and he only appears in 4 levels. The good news about that is that I kinda hate using him in this game, so that's okay. Rambi is slow as molasses when he normally moves, but you can entice him to run at full speed by shaking the Wii remote. Every level Rambi is in pretty much requires you to run through it. If you stop, you die, either because the ground is falling out beneath you or simply because you don't have enough momentum to make the jumps. So in Rambi levels, you're just shaking all the time, and if you stop for even a moment, you lose all of your speed. It's by far the worst application of motion controls in the game. And yeah, it's the same control as the powered up roll maneuver, but with that, it's usually only used for a few seconds, and it's the only action you have to take. You're not pushing buttons to jump and maneuver while you're frantically shaking. With Rambi, you are. Maybe it's just me, but I struggle to keep my rhythm with this. I don't know what it is, if it's the placement of obstacles compared to my shaking rhythm, or just my arms getting tired, but this area right here kills me constantly. Nope, no more Rambi please. Make a sequel, map that action to a button, and then get back to me. That's okay though, because the real buddies aren't the ones in the game, they're the buddies you have in real life that, like, come over to your house and play video games with you and stuff. Sadly, those aren't included in the game, they're sold separately. What I'm trying to say is, Donkey Kong Country Returns includes a multiplayer experience unlike anything in previous games. The original trilogy also had support for 2 players. In fact, there were 2 different 2-player modes, but they didn't fundamentally change the gameplay. In 2-player contest, each player would control their own Kong duo and compete over who could finish faster. In 2-player team, each player would control a single Kong in the pairing, and the secondary character would take over in the event of damage or a switch out. In either case, the game basically implemented a more structured form of passing the controller in the single-player campaign. You were still playing one at a time. DKCR replaces that with something entirely new. Player 1 controls DK, player 2 controls Diddy. They both play at the same time. This creates a wholly different experience. For one, it's the only way to directly control Diddy, something you can't do in single player. Diddy retains the advantages he provides DK in single player, like using his jetpack to clear gaps. In addition, he's given his peanut pop guns from DK64 to shoot at the ground as his own ground pound. And in a pinch, Diddy can mount DK, ceding control to the first player and restoring the full range of moves from the single player version. And even then, Diddy can still fire his pop guns at enemies to stun them from a distance. There's so much variety here. I had never played this way before because, well, I don't game socially as much as an adult as I did as a child. Thankfully, my friend Jason came over so I could get footage for this video, and it ended up being a lot of fun. In some ways, it's easier, like being able to collect bananas twice as fast in bonus rooms. But it also requires strategy, as you're essentially splitting your full complement of skills among two people. Playing as Diddy creates a perfect younger sibling mode, as the jetpack makes platforming easier and Diddy can always jump back onto DK if things get a little too rough. This is such a fun implementation of cooperative multiplayer, one that really helps bring friends together. See, you can make the monkeys kiss. I've covered a lot of the individual elements of this game, a few of which I've been at least somewhat critical towards, but what's really important is how all of those mechanics come together, and what kind of overall experience they ultimately create. That experience is a blisteringly difficult game, and that makes it so much fun! It nails exactly what I come to platforming games for. That moment-to-moment challenge of encountering an obstacle and figuring out how to navigate it. Retro perfectly captures the feel of the original trilogy through introducing creative new gimmicks that gradually ramp up in difficulty, but they're implemented with a much more modern sense of spectacle and dynamism. It hits that perfect blend of twitch reflex and careful strategizing. A level that immediately springs to mind is Switcheroo, where passing through sensors swaps out red and blue gel platforms. There's always a logical and speedy path forward, but you really have to look before you leap. You're constantly thinking one or two steps ahead while navigating climbable surfaces, dodging enemies, and positioning yourself just right. It's so much fun, and that's just one example of the creativity in level design. Difficulty balancing is such an art unto itself. I always try to be cognizant of what the challenge is supposed to be, and that a one-size-fits-all approach can't work across the board. There are different schools of thought and different perspectives that slide in and out of fashion, and it's in this arena that Returns separates the new from the old. When I covered DKC, I defended the spread-out save points that focused its difficulty around mastering multiple stages in a single go. I think that's a perfectly valid way of structuring difficulty. Returns balances the difficulty in the opposite direction. The game saves automatically after every level, which makes the game easier. Each stage has more checkpoints. Lives are saved between play sessions, making them far easier to stock up. Each character can now take 2 hits instead of 1. To balance that out, the moment-to-moment gameplay has become much more difficult. On the one hand, that can tend to discourage a broader mastery of the levels or worlds, rendering each challenge rather disposable. You get lucky once, and you move on. But on the other hand, the leniency in the macro sense allows for individual challenges far more punishing than the old games could get away with. It is completely possible to die in the same spot dozens of times, but it never feels too taxing to throw yourself at a level over and over and over again when the punishment isn't too severe. It all comes down to a matter of taste. I can like either style as long as the implementation is balanced, and I think this game does a terrific job focusing on smaller, more forgiving challenges. This ain't an easy game. It's impossible for me to say whether it's harder or easier than the old games. I know those games so well that I can beat them all easily, and when they were difficult, I was 9. Returns is certainly harder for me right now, but is that because it's a harder game, or because I'm still not as good at it as I am with the ones I've been playing for 30 years? The one thing I hate, which is actually a nice feature, is the super guide. If you die 8 times in a level, the checkpoint pig will start telling you how much you suck. I mean, he will start alerting you to the option of enlisting Super Kong to finish the level for you, although you won't keep any items he collects. I don't like the game playing itself, and I would never use it, but I guess it's not a bad thing to have for people who want it or need it. It's entirely optional, it's just... I don't need your help. Stop taking pity on me. I got this. Shut up, pig! Nothing wounds my already damaged pride more than restarting after yet another death, only to be greeted by that sound. It's the failure threshold, and I just crossed it. Thanks for letting me know. Even amid the barrel cannons and whale riding and the being chased by hundreds of spiders, there is a level type I continually yearn for. It's the mines. I yearn for the mines. In the Rare games, minecarts begat roller coasters, begat toboggans, begat a return to minecarts, and that's seemingly where we're going to stay forever. That's okay, the aesthetic doesn't matter. The minecart levels have always been some of my favorites. A high-octane rush of dips and jumps, obstacles and enemies alike hurtling towards you. Oh, if only my childhood could have seen these levels. I mean, geez! Falling ceilings, the track being sliced up in front of you, clinging to trains on the track above you, moles dropping bombs, riding on top of a giant eggshell. There's this dive right here I always think I'm going to die on and somehow don't. Oh, these levels are fantastic. This is awakening my inner adrenaline junkie. What more you got for me, Donkey Kong Country Returns? Ah, yes, the rocket barrel stages. Retro's big new addition to the Donkey Kong formula. There's only a single button for control. If you press it, your barrel rockets up. If you don't press it, it starts to fall. There's a finesse to controlling it. You don't want to just hold the button unless you want that to happen. You have to find the rhythm while avoiding obstacles, and there are a lot of obstacles. Collectibles are always placed in such a way that force you to get as close as you can to danger without touching. And like with the minecart levels, all it takes is one mistake to die. They're so hard and so fun. Oh, and you want to know what the best part is? World 4 is a world that is nothing but minecarts and rocket barrels. Even the boss fight takes place on a train. No joke, while recording for this video, I revisited these stages so many times I inadvertently maxed out all of my item capacities. Also, no joke, this is my single favorite world in any Donkey Kong game. Fight me. But you'll have to catch me first. Whee! The boss battles have continually evolved since we started Donkey Kong Dissection. In Donkey Kong Country, the bosses were minor speed bumps on the way to the next world. The second two games spiced up the proceedings quite a bit. Retro supercharges the whole concept. I've stated before that I never minded the bosses in Donkey Kong Country. They were a nice break between levels, and it's the levels I feel are the focus. Returns might push things a little too far in the opposite direction. Some of the bosses have a few too many phases and take up just enough time so that when you inevitably die just before landing the final hit, you're going to cringe at the realization that you have to do the whole thing over again. It's also the true test of the new partner system. See, back in the old games, it was certainly annoying to lose your other Kong because you were left with only one hit. Here, losing Diddy means losing that roll to get away from enemies. It means losing that hover jump that helps you time otherwise damaging landings. Losing Diddy in the middle of a fight can be devastating. These bosses certainly present creative challenges though. Given what I said earlier about Returns focusing on the moment-to-moment difficulty, this is one of the few spots where the game insists you have to master everything in one go. As I've become more skilled at the game, I've come to appreciate the seemingly endless barrage of attacks. That said, the last two bosses can bite my hairy monkey cakes. Ugh, that Colonel Pluck. What even is his pattern? You have to get under him to damage him, but you can't get touched by his legs. Sometimes when he jumps up, he'll expose his weak point, so you have to hurry under there before it's too late. But oh, fooled you! He's gonna land with his legs closed and hurt you. Sometimes he'll give you an opening to run under him to the other side. Sometimes he'll just rush you into a corner and there's nothing you can do to avoid taking a hit. Then there's Tiki Tome, the final boss. He's one of those floating hands bosses. One of those floating hands bosses. One of those floating hands bosses. You really have to have perfect reflexes to avoid those hands. And then when you get to his second phase, your jumps had better be perfect or that whole bouncing off of objects mechanic is going to ensure you never have time to land a hit. It would actually be a really good final boss, except that it doesn't give you a DK barrel. Well, that's not entirely fair. It does give you a DK barrel at the very start of the stage. But unlike every other boss stage, there's a vertical rocket barrel level in between that and the boss. And when you die against Tiki Tome, which you will, the game is kind enough to start you right back at the boss. But you don't have Diddy anymore. Yeah, it gives you a DK barrel for a gameplay mechanic where having a partner doesn't benefit you in any way, but it won't give you one for the section where that would actually be helpful. You either have to exit the stage and redo the whole thing every time you die, or, like me, just get used to going solo. Even K. Rool gives you a DK barrel. Sometimes he gives you multiple DK barrels. What? Invincibility potion? No thanks, I don't need your charity, I got this. Told you. But you want to know something funny? As I've been editing this, I've had to go back and record pickups of gameplay footage, like I have to do with all of these videos. Some of the things I wrote about didn't manifest. Every play session is different after all. But when I went back to re-record the bosses, I had even more of a struggle trying to replicate scenarios I'd experienced in the past. Part of that, I'd argue, is down to getting good luck with enemy patterns, but after unexpectedly breezing through Colonel Pluck and getting my first ever partner-assisted win over Tiki Tome, I had to conclude that, without realizing it, I'd gotten better. It ties back into what I was wondering earlier when I compared the difficulty of this game to that of the trilogy. Throughout the entire run that I recorded, I noticed that for the first time, I was beginning to feel comfortable. I was starting to get used to the challenge in the same way that I'd gotten used to the challenge of the SNES games. And while I'll miss that palpable tension as it recedes farther and farther into the background of my playthroughs, knowing it's because my skills have improved makes it a very satisfying plateau to reach. Tiki Tome still needs a DK barrel though, that's a stupid place to put one. The bosses are what make me appreciate the Tikis as villains. I like the conceit that all of the bosses, except for Tiki Tome of course, are brainwashed animals, although it does make me feel bad to then beat them up. Each boss Tiki is a different instrument, and when they use their theme music to control the animal, it's done in the instrumentation of that Tiki. That's fun. And yeah, it's really satisfying to shake that Wii remote and get 22 hits on those jerks when you're done. The funny thing about the bosses, something I didn't realize until watching my friends, the Pixel Mavericks, stream the Switch re-release earlier this year, is that having a second player completely trivializes all the bosses. In two-player mode, the only way to truly die and be booted out is if both players end up dead at the same time. Otherwise, you can just keep tagging in replacements at the cost of a life. As long as you keep your Kong's health spaced apart enough, even the toughest boss will eventually go down on the first try through sheer attrition. It's a funny old world. Through a simple mode change, the hardest parts of the game become the easiest parts. Alright, this is what I've been waiting for. Bonus collectibles in Donkey Kong games tend to be my white whale. That's the closest whale we have in this game. When collectibles are good, the game is very, very good, but when they are bad, it is horrid. And here comes Donkey Kong Country Returns to reinvent the wheel. Let's dig into it. The main collectibles in DKC Returns have been streamlined down to Kong letters and puzzle pieces. Kong letters return from the original DKC trilogy, but with a vastly different role. They weren't really collectibles in the past. If you got all 4 of them in a stage, you'd be rewarded with an extra life, but that was it. Here, they actually are collectibles. The game does keep track of them. If you collect all 4 letters in a stage in a single go, and then do that for every level in a world, that opens a bonus temple level. With 1 level for each world, it's basically the equivalent of the Lost World in Donkey Kong Country 2. It's just a little bit different. In that game, even if you didn't find every Crim coin, you could still probably accumulate enough to access some of the Lost World levels. Here, you have to achieve perfection. But I think that's fair. It's only 4 collectibles per stage. The stages are linear, the letters indicate a clear order, so if you ever miss one, you can pretty easily narrow down where in the stage the missing letter is. They're not especially cryptic to find, they just require observation and some occasional risk-taking to successfully collect. I like this system a lot. It's not overstuffed, it's intuitive, it's focused around platforming challenge rather than head-scratching, pace-breaking exploration, and the reward is more fun, tough-as-nails levels. Oh, those temple levels! Built around a singular aesthetic, each stage features its own ridiculously hard challenge, and there are no checkpoints. From long sequences of bouncing tires to navigating around spiky death, to hitting every single switch to keep your platform on its track, to the infamous rising lava stage, every unique gimmick is a nightmare. A lovely nightmare. You really have to have mastered all the mechanics of this game to succeed here. Many of the obstacles in the secret levels will instantly result in death if you don't get a high bounce off an enemy, for which the window is much tighter than in previous games. Heck, even outside the temples, stages will eventually throw you a curveball by punishing you for getting a good bounce. You really have to learn what height you need to reach at any given time. A few of these stages start with DK barrels, most don't though. I'm not sure how they decided which ones should and which ones shouldn't have them, but you know, I'm okay with that. The stages are long, but not as dauntingly repetitive as the boss fights, and there really is a satisfying sense of getting a little bit farther every time you try. The temple stages actually tie into what little story this game has. Donkey Kong Country 3 established the idea that there was a magical component to bananas. This game doesn't render that quite as esoterically, but the concept still exists. It's revealed towards the end of the game that the Tiki Tacks are actually bringing new Tikis to life by filling wooden dolls with magical banana mash. Tiki Tome creates his hands by dousing the previous boss Tikis in chewed up banana. It does make me wonder though that if Tikis are created through bananas, how did these Tikis stealing the bananas come to life in the first place? What's the chicken and egg scenario here? Ugh, chicken. So finishing a temple stage nets you an orb. Collecting every orb unlocks one more bonus level after the end of the game. A new temple opens containing a giant magical banana that pulls DK and Diddy into a whimsical world of floating platforms, giant fruit, and music from Donkey Kong Jr. Yeah, we're never beating the modern DK as DK Jr. allegations, are we? Anyway, this is the pinnacle of difficulty. Projectiles are flying everywhere, platforms explode, perspective comes into play, and it's hard to get mad at it because it's all so happy. This is how you do unlockable bonus content. This is perfection. The other main collectibles are the puzzle pieces. Unlike the Kong letters, they are often fairly well hidden and require more exploration. Frankly, I'd be okay if they didn't exist. But it's almost as if the puzzle pieces realize that and do their best to remain as unobtrusive as possible. And I appreciate that. They don't contribute to 100% completion and they don't cordon off additional gameplay. In fact, their rewards have nothing to do with the game itself. Every stage has a varying number of pieces, and collecting every one of them in a stage unlocks behind-the-scenes content like design sketches or dioramas or music tracks. And you know what? That's great. I don't care enough to find all of them since I don't have to, but that's great. When I do unlock something, it's fun to see. And in a lot of cases, if I see a puzzle piece or can tell the stage is trying to hide something from me, I'll go out of my way to get it. Rocket Barrel stages love to tie puzzle pieces behind collecting every banana in a string of hard-to-reach bananas, and that's just a fun challenge to try for. In addition to floating out in the open, puzzle pieces can be found in bonus rooms. Yes, bonus rooms return, this time in the vein of the first game. They throw a bunch of bananas, balloons, and coins in a room, and if you collect them all within a time limit, you're rewarded with a puzzle piece. They don't have that split identity problem from Donkey Kong Country, where they are ostensibly meant to reward you with goodies you need to survive, but are actually only concerned with whether or not you find that they exist. No, they are simply a bonus. I'm happy to find them because, hey, more lives. If I fail the bonus, I can't go back in and farm bananas. I don't get the puzzle piece. Who cares, I still got a reward. Banana coins once again make a comeback. These games are determined to have in-game currency. In DKC2, they were used to access basic game functions like saving and traveling. In DK64, they were finite, character-specific collectibles, despite the fact that several of the purchases made with them affected all Kongs. Up until this point, it's really DKC3 that made the best use of a money system. They primarily existed to access bonus games, but also facilitated parts of the trading sequence. In returns, saving is automatic, traveling between worlds is under your full control, there aren't moves to buy or items to trade or even sideshows to wager on. There is no Candy Kong, or Wrinkly Kong, or Swanky Kong, or Funky Kong. Instead, only Cranky returns as the proprietor of a shop, and that's why there are coins. The range of products is actually pretty diverse. You can purchase extra life balloons, squawks can be hired to lead you to hidden puzzle pieces, and power-ups exist to give the Kongs extra hearts for a full level, or to flat out make a character invincible for multiple hits. These are all useful add-ons that allow you to customize the level of difficulty. They're also completely optional. I admit I never purchased a single one of these things until I was getting footage for this video and felt I needed to try them all out. Yeah, I end up really hoarding my wealth in this game. The only purchase I do regularly make is the key in each world. The maps feature branching paths, but they're blocked off by a padlock. Opening a lock can give you options as to which levels you want to tackle, or they can ensure that you play every level to open that temple stage. I'm not crazy about this, but it also doesn't bother me. With the possible exception of the beginning of the game, I'm never in a position where I don't have 20 coins, so it's just rote. I make it to Cranky's, buy the key, and move on. It's not a particularly engaging extra step. I don't feel I have to earn anything. But it's also not a pain in the butt. It's just the smallest of chores I have to do. The rest of the items in the store are at least potentially more interesting or useful. If you are stymied by a particular level and need help, you have to start making economical decisions about how best to spend your money. Do you stock up on extra lives so you can keep bashing your head against the wall? Or do you invest in tools to make your Kongs a little hardier for the journey? Do you have enough money to keep throwing at Cranky to keep from running out of lives? Actually, I've never gotten a game over in this game before, so I don't even know what happens when you run out of lives. I mean, the game saves after every level, so what kind of punishment can it possibly dole out that's different from simply losing a life? I guess it'd be interesting to find out. Okay, start a new file, opening cutscene. Gotta make it past the first level at least. Okay, on to the second level. Fall in a hole, fall in a hole, fall in a hole. Oh, okay, so that's what happens. If all that wasn't enough, every stage can be completed in time trial mode with pretty challenging goals to meet. Upon finishing the final hidden stage, the reward is a mirror that allows you to play any stage in mirror mode, with only one heart and no partner. If you succeeded all of those, I actually don't know. I tried a few of these just for footage. I'm not planning to ever do all of them. Well, let's see. They unlock more image galleries. Who cares? And they raise your completion percentage to 200%? Ugh, that's terrible. I'm still not doing it. Look at my big number right here. I'm already on page 12 of this script, I think you get the point. There is a lot to do in this game if you want to. Some of it is a bit fluffy, pads out the game more than I'd like, and could probably be excised, but it's fluff you don't need to engage with to experience the full game, so I can live with it. The completion stuff that actually matters is really good. Yes, this is the perfect balance, one I feel can please absolutely everybody. In all of these other Donkey Kong dissection videos, I have provided a little bit of my personal context linking me to these games. In every instance, I received them within about a year of their release, if not sooner. I was there for the hype, I lived the culture. I was a happy kid, the original target audience. And yes, I have since found a picture corroborating my assumption that I did in fact get Donkey Kong Country for my 9th birthday, just like I said. Given that I opened this video talking about my heel turn in the GameCube era and my redemption arc in the Wii era, you would probably guess that I also leapt at the chance to return to Donkey Kong Country. Actually, I didn't. See, while I was a happy-go-lucky college student during those early Wii years, by the time 2010 rolled around, I was out of college, living on my own and trying to find work. My first apartment out of college was sharing a studio with a friend. Needless to say, I didn't have a lot of room for things that weren't essential, so nearly all of my video game consoles stayed packed away with my mom. All I really had room for was a camera, a laptop, and a dream of building up a barely sustainable YouTube business. Please help me out on Patreon. When it comes to Donkey Kong Country Returns, I missed the hype, I missed the buzz, I missed its success. It wasn't until several more years passed that I was motivated by seeing the Geek Critique's video on it and its sequel, and finally tracked down a used copy. That was only a couple of years before I started in earnest on Donkey Kong Dissection. I say this because it's my video and I can say whatever I want. But I'm saying it to show I don't have a lot of nostalgia for this game. No one stays a kid forever, and I wouldn't have been a kid even when it was new. But that doesn't mean you can't go home again, even if what home is changes. Donkey Kong Country Returns reminds me of the good old days. It has the characters, it has the locations, it has the music. But it's also a very different experience. Donkey Kong Country Returns isn't afraid to chart its own path, to make itself a little more modern. And I'm happy to say that my nostalgia didn't make me afraid to go along for the ride. My nostalgia didn't blind me to the realization that Donkey Kong Country Returns is just as good as what came before it, just in different ways. The past will always be there, but I'm just as excited to see what the future holds. Life is all about moving forward. We shouldn't be afraid of this modern era of Donkey Kong, no matter how different it may be. Wait, this isn't the modern era of Donkey Kong anymore. I don't own a Switch 2. I haven't played Donkey Kong Bonanza. I didn't even know there was going to be a Donkey Kong Bonanza when I first started working on this video. And it's a 3D collectathon? I'm not ready for things to change yet. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this latest entry in Donkey Kong Dissection. I can't believe it's been 4 years since the first installment came out, and that together we've built up a fun library of video essays that are among my favorite projects. Obviously, next up will be the direct sequel to Returns, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, a game that noticed the lack of Gorilla Glacier and made up for it in a big way. I'm guessing that will be done about this time next year. Thanks very much to the Geek Critique for letting me use some of his footage in this video. Be sure to check out his fantastic video game critiques on his channel if you somehow haven't already. Thanks again to Jason for helping me get that 2-player footage. And of course, thanks to my patrons, some of whom you can see scrolling by right now. They are the reason I'm able to continue doing this. If you can help out at all, I would truly appreciate it. Check out some of my other ongoing series like Dragon Ball Dissection and OZO. I will see you next time!